All right, let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Training camp is upon us. The Seattle squad, which made a ton of moves this offseason, we've covered them ad nauseum, is preparing to put everything together and get ready for the 2025 regular season. And to that end, the Seattle Seahawks just made another move that I think highlights one new addition in particular that they are incredibly high on. I think this is great news for Seattle. Before we get into that, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Seattle Seahawks under head coach Mike Macdonald, general manager John Schneider, of course, they've made a ton of moves over the course of this offseason. I mean, we could spend an hour going through them all, and we have spent hours going through them all over the course of the offseason, but they're not done making decisions. With training camp right upon us, the Seattle Seahawks made another roster move, slightly surprising, but it clearly indicates that they're high on one young player, one rookie in particular. Let's pull up this report real quick. This is courtesy of NBC Sports Pro Football Talk. From the report, the Seahawks released veteran tight end Noah Fant on Sunday. The team announced he was due a non-guaranteed salary of $8.49 million this season, and if the move saves, $8.91 million against the salary cap. Fant, 27, spent 3 seasons with the Seahawks after being acquired in the 2022 trade that sent Russell Wilson to Denver. He appeared in 48 games, starting 42, and made 130 receptions for 1,400 yards and 5 scores in his time in Seattle. The Broncos made Fant a first-round pick in 2019, and he spent 3 seasons there. He caught 170 balls for 1,905 yards and 10 scores in Denver. Second-year tight end A.J. Barner and rookie Elijah Arroyo. That's the guy we're going to focus on today. Very interesting here. And veteran free agent addition Eric Sobert will see more opportunities at the position with Fant's release. The Seahawks also have a pair of undrafted rookie tight ends in the roster in Marshall Lang and Nick Callerout. All right, so the timing of this is very interesting. You always have to look at the timing of any sort of moves and put everything in context, right? So a couple days ago, really about a week ago, the log jam of second-round draft picks being signed finally broke. So to not bore you with all the details, there's all this stuff with guaranteed monies, a lot of negotiation going on where in terms of virtually every second-round pick that was selected in the 2025 NFL draft hadn't signed yet. There was kind of a log jam of negotiations that finally broke. And then 2 days ago, Elijah Arroyo signed his deal with the Seattle Seahawks. And then not 1 day later, they released Noah Fant. The timing there is, of course, not a coincidence. I think the Seahawks have been trying to move off of Noah Fant. I think they've been trying to either trade or release him going back weeks and months at this point, certainly since the NFL draft and certainly since mini camps and OTAs after they've had a chance to evaluate Arroyo. And now they finally got the opportunity. They just didn't want to go into a camp without at least one competent tight end in terms of a receiving threat they could trust in case the holdout extended for weeks and months. Smart move by John Schneider, again, waiting till the last possible moment to make this deal to make sure they weren't put in a bad position during training camp. Little under the radar thing there, but critically important. But let's take a step back and look at what this means for Elijah Arroyo, the Seattle Seahawks young second-round draft pick. Let's evaluate Noah Fant's performance. And we got a chart here kind of highlighting exactly what Noah Fant provided last season for the Seattle Seahawks among tight ends in the National Football League. So you'll notice that his overall grade and receiving grade, the first 2 rows there, or the second and third row, on this graphic here, courtesy of Pro Football Focus, he finished 25th overall grade, 20th receiving grade, right? We're talking bottom third, bottom quartile if you look at overall grade. Not good out of 32 tight ends, 32 starting tight ends. Not what you want, especially in a Seahawks offense. Last year, Geno Smith did a lot of good things. They had DK Metcalf, JSN. They had playmakers. We should have seen a much more effective analytical performance out of Noah Fant. And when you look down at his raw data, again, same kind of story there. Sometimes when you look at the analytics, you'll see sort of a disconnect, right? A player will grade out extremely well, even though his raw data isn't there, right? That's almost what you would have expected with Noah Fant, with all the great opportunities and all the single coverages and things like that he would have gotten, right? With all the attention on Metcalf, all the attention on JSN. He should have had low production and high grades, and sometimes you get the opposite, right? You have poor grades and you have high production just because the team's feeding you the football. Both categories here, you look at production, receptions, and yards, bottom third, bottom quartile as well. So no matter where you look at it when it comes to Noah Fant, he did not get it done in terms of analytically, in terms of production. Clearly a position they needed to upgrade, and that's why they moved off of him, and primarily why they selected in the second round tight end Elijah Arroyo. All right, so let's pull up some of Arroyo's stats here, comparing to other top tight ends in this past NFL draft. We're looking at, of course, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, Terrence Ferguson, sneaky good guy out of Oregon. The Rams got a good one there. I know Seahawks fans, you probably don't want to hear that, but that was a good player by them. And then, of course, Elijah Arroyo. So I wanted to look at yards per reception and yak per reception. To me, that's an indication of a secondary or tertiary playmaker, what you can do in an offense. Because the Seahawks aren't looking for Arroyo to be their number one receiving threat, right? They got JSN they're trying to develop. They have added Cooper Kupp to be the mentor and number two, right? They're not looking for Arroyo to come in here and be, 130 catches, 140 catches. They want him to come in here and be the secondary guy, the guy to take advantage of those seams up the middle as teams have those two deep safeties to cover those receivers, Kupp and JSN, a guy that can take advantage of one-on-one matchups because linebackers get put on him or bad cover safeties get put on him. That's what they're looking for. In order to see that, I want to see how much yards per reception, how big a plays you can generate in those situations, those deep seam balls, and I want to see your yards after catch. How do you separate from those linebackers in man coverage when the opportunity arises? And when you compare those two statistics against other top tight ends in the 2025 class, Arroyo flies off the page. You can see Loveland, Warren, Ferguson, Arroyo working left to right. You can see blue on this graphic here is yards per reception. The red here on the graphic is yak per reception. You can see Arroyo's blue significantly better than the other three tight ends. It ain't even close. And you can see the yak per reception significantly better than Loveland and Tyler Warren's, and essentially at the same level as Terrence Ferguson, one of the best yak tight ends in the entire 2025 class. In fact, in my opinion, he was the best yak tight end. So if you look at what the Seahawks got in Arroyo, they got a big play receiver down the field to attack the seams, and also one of, I think, the second best yak tight end in the 2025 class. That's exactly what they need, right? Again, teams are going to roll coverage to JSN. They're going to pay Cooper Kupp a lot of attention. You're going to get a lot of great matchups. You're going to get a lot of seam opportunities if you're Elijah Arroyo. Last year, Noah Fant didn't take advantage of those opportunities. Arroyo, based on his skill set, based on his production in college, he's perfectly suited to do that. But there's also another factor we want to evaluate here. If you're not going to be the primary tight end, or primary playmaker in offense, you've got to take advantage of the opportunities presented to you. You can't have drops. And that's where Arroyo, again, shines. If we go to our next graphic here, this is Arroyo against those same tight ends drop percentage. You want this to be lower, right? The percentage of drops you have per target, per reception. And you can see here, Arroyo tied with Tyler Warren, great tight end out of Penn State, best in the class. So you can see Loveland a little less than 4. That's outstanding. Tyler Warren, 2.8. Terrence Ferguson, all the way over 8. Big red flag there, big concern there. He's great at yak, but he drops the ball too much. Arroyo, outstanding hands. So in summation here, we're looking at Elijah Arroyo, his numbers, his raw production, and his ability to avoid the drops fits perfectly in terms of what the Seattle Seahawks need at the tight end position. And again, we're comparing him against three guys, Loveland, Warren, and Ferguson, who are quality tight ends. I think all of these guys are going to be great players in the National Football League. We're not picking, mediocre guys here to compare Arroyo against just to make his numbers look good. These are top flight guys, and Elijah Arroyo completely lines up with them extremely well. In fact, is better than them in a lot of key categories, certainly when it comes to fit. Clearly, Elijah Arroyo was a great addition by Seattle. All right, we got some more stuff to break down when it comes to Arroyo and the Seahawks position. But first, Seattle fans, in the comment section below, as we're talking tight ends here today, I want to ask you guys this. Who, in your opinion, is the greatest tight end in Seattle Seahawks history? A lot of different directions you could go here. Really go old school, new school, kind of in between. Really curious what you have to say. This is an interesting one. Who, in your opinion, is the greatest tight end in Seahawks history? Put them in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure you sign up for our weekly newsletter courtesy of the Substack platform. Look, 100% free, not trying to sell you anything or anything like that. It's just a weekly newsletter to put out extra content that we want to provide to you, the fan, with links, articles, stats of the week, best comment of the week. If you have a great comment, you may see yourself in there. So make sure you sign up. Again, 100% free, link in the description box below. But when it comes to the Seattle Seahawks and Elijah Arroyo, I think we need to take a step back and understand what Seattle is doing here in terms of their strategy long term. Because you mentioned, or the article mentioned a few pieces ago, and here let me go back to that so people can see it, that the Seattle Seahawks freed up about $9 million in cap space, a little bit less, releasing Noah Fant. Now, why does that matter, right? They're not going to make another move at this point, at least not a big headline move. So freeing up cap space today versus freeing it up in, say, March or April doesn't really build you a lot right now. But what it does do, it opens you up some cap flexibility for signing some of these these young stars that are growing into veterans that Seattle wants to lock down, right? We talked about the strategy with Schneider in Seattle this offseason was fully predicated on locking down these quality young players across the board, offense, defense, as the next generation, right? With the Russell Wilson deal, the Russell Wilson trade flooded Seattle with an incredible amount of draft picks, and they hit on a lot of them across the board, whether they were Denver's or theirs or acquired through other trades. They did a lot of really good stuff. But when it came time, or now it's coming time to sign and extend these guys, there's only so many dollars to flow around in the salary cap driven National Football League. So what do you have to do? You have to make tough decisions. You have to trade Geno Smith. You have to trade DK Metcalf. Two moves we talked about at the time to allow them to open up cap space to lock down those core guys, right? Because if they let these guys walk, what was the whole point of the Russell Wilson trade, right? You got all these good young players. If you let them all walk because you can't sign them, the trade made no sense. Schneider did not want that to happen. It's the smart move. So we're seeing, or at least we saw earlier this offseason, them trade away to get more assets. Now they're moving off of a guy like Noah Fant, again, to lock or open up, $9 million about in salary cap space. So that way they can use that already in negotiations, maybe some in-season, maybe some preseason contracts to lock them down now before they get closer to open market and the dollars really get out of hand when they're trying to, when they've got other teams potentially vying for these young guys' services. So I think you have to look at what the Seattle Seahawks are doing here as a whole and understand it's a two-part problem, right? They want to put the best guy on the field that fits what they're trying to do schematically in terms of strategy. And I think based on the data we showed to you guys today that Noah Fant not getting it done very clearly, data speaks to that. Arroyo, based on his attributes in college, he's perfectly suited to get it done. There are some concerns, there are some red flags, right? Only one real year of production, in terms of his complete skill set, it may not be 100% there. So look, there are some issues with Arroyo, but when you look at what he does well, what he's suited to, it's exactly what the Seattle Seahawks under new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak are looking for. But so it addresses that need, that position, that tactical point, but it also continues to follow up the Seattle Seahawks long-term strategy of moving off of veterans that they feel are a little too expensive and opening up cap space for them to lock down those core players they acquired during the Russell Wilson trade. And I think this is all part of a great Seahawks strategy. Arroyo is off to a good start. I think he's got a great chance to become a key piece of this team, but it is just that, a team, a well-constructed team with the Seattle Seahawks, led by, of course, head coach Mike Macdonald and really phenomenal general manager John Schneider.